Hi guys, I hope you're doing great. Welcome to my channel. In this episode, we're going to learn setter and getter property and also implemented property in object-oriented programming. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to subscribe it. And if you enjoyed the video and find it useful, don't forget to like it. Let's begin. Well, in previous episodes, we talked about the level of accessibility and why it is important and why should we monitor the level of accessibility and why we should monitor the changes that happen in our variables. We said that variables must be private and we should not make them public because in that way they can be changed sometimes to invalid data. For example, we have an attribute like age and we have to control that a negative amount should not be assigned to that age. So if the variable is private, how can we change the data of that variable? Now we want to talk about that. We use setter and getter. We use getter in order to get the data which is in our variable, and we use setter to set the data of our variable. For example, we want to change the amount of variable. Okay, as you see here, classes should protect their own data, and this protection means keeping the instance variable private in most scenarios and provide alternative means to make requests instead. And these alternative means are setter and getter. Okay, in this example, we have some variables which are private, and in order to set the title and get the amount of title, we use setter and getter. Right here you see we have a function, its name is getTitle. It returns the title, and also we have another function which is setTitle, and we set the amount of title. And always our setter has an input which is the new value of our variable, and we actually set new value to our attribute. Okay, I'll show you by an example how we can actually use setter and getter. Okay, in here we have a class which his name is person, and this person has two attributes, a name and an ID. So in order to change the value of ID and name, we need setter, and in order to get the data we need getter. So here you see I write get ID, and this get ID returns the ID, and I have get name, and this one returns name. Okay, and also we have set ID. It actually has an input, and we change the value of ID. And also here we have set name, and we set new value to our name attribute. And in here, when we actually create our instance, initially we set name and ID by a constructor. And here you see in setter we can also have a condition to set the data, and we can actually monitor the value which is gonna be the new value of our variable. I'll show you one example, but first let's run the program. Here I have 3 persons, and I want to show you, for example, the name of these 3. I write console.writeLine and p1.getName, and here I get the name of this person, and I just need to copy, and I change here, and let's run the program. Okay, you see the names are right here. Okay, for example, you want to change the name of one of our objects. I can use p1 dot set for example name. I just need to give it a string. For example, I change it to Chris. So let's run the program again, but I need to write this line after the change. Okay, And let me comment this line. So if I run the program, you see our new name is right here. Chris is the name. Okay, let's do some changes here. For set function, for set ID, I want to first set a condition in order to check whether the ID is, for example, positive or negative. I don't want my ID to be negative. So first I check if it is positive, so then I can assign that value to our ID variable. Okay, let's here do some checking if underline ID is actually bigger than 0, so I can actually assign this. But if it is negative, I can use else. For example, I don't want to change the ID, I just need to print something. I print invalid data. Okay, and here I change the name, and I also want to set ID, and I write, for example, -5. Okay, let's run the program. Here you see the first line is invalid data because I actually gave that function a negative number, which is actually invalid, and I have to change it to something positive like 10. And if I start again, you see it is true and there is no actually error. So as you see here, we have control over the changes that is going to happen in our attributes, and we can set conditions or write whatever code we want in order to monitor these changes. So as you see here, this is the way we use a setter and getter, and set ID and set name, or get ID and get name in this example. Well, in object-oriented programming in various languages, we use setter and getter like the one that I show you. But in C#, this language provides us with the golden opportunity to use another actually method in order to actually act like setter and getter. This is the easy way of using these setter and getter, and you don't need to write get something or set something. For example, when you are writing a big program, you might, for example, you have 1,000 variables, and it is time consuming to write setter and getter for each one. But we have another way of writing these functions. I'll show you an example. What is this new way? Here we have a variable which is private int score with small s, and here this is the old way of setter and getter. We need a getter, get score, and setter, a set score, and this has an input, and it says here if the score is lower than 0, we set score to 0, and we don't want it to be negative. But the new one is here property. Instead of those getter and setter, we write this syntax. We have public int score. Usually it is with capital actually letter. It starts with capital letter, and actually the private one starts with small letter right here. Score here starts with small letter, and the actually this one property starts with a capital letter. And here we have get. Between these curly bracket, it returns score, and we have set here actually set the new value. But what is this one keyword? This keyword value is the new value that you want to assign. This is the way we use property. Here we create a new object, for example player, and right here as you see player.score equals to 50. Here I am going to assign 50 to score, and when I write this line, it actually goes right here. This value, which is 50, is going to be actually analyzed and it's going to be checked, and if it is higher than 0, it will be assigned to score. Okay, I'll show you by example how we can use these property instead of setter and getter. Okay, here I want to use that property. I have two attributes, name and ID, and I want to use that property to be able to change the actual value of these variables and also get the value of these variables. So I write public, for example, int for ID, and I write an ID with a capital letter, and I actually open curly bracket, and here I write get, and also it needs a curly bracket, and here I just need to return the variable that I want, which is ID with small actually I. I need set here in order to set new value to our variable, and here I write if. Okay, here new value is called value. This keyword is our value, and if this value is actually higher than 0, I can change ID to actually value, but actually if actually other way else, I want, for example, to print something. Invalid data. Okay, now this is ready for ID. Let's see how we can work with this. And here we don't need these setter and getters. I comment them. Okay, and I want to change the ID of the first person. I write console.writeLine, and here I write p1 actually dot ID. I want to get the ID here, but first I have to set a value. p1 actually dot ID equals to for example -5. Okay, we're going to see if it is working or not. So as you see, it says invalid data. Okay, and this one is 0 because if you do not assign a value to our variable, it is by default set to 0. Okay, because I am going to assign -5 and it is not happening, so the new value is not actually assigned to our variable. So in the next line, when we want to print the value, it is going to show 0 because our initial value is 0. So let me change it to for example 20, and now if I start the program, you see 20 is right here. So this is actually more simple way to change the value and set the value of our attributes, and also control over these changes, and we can monitor these changes. And you can actually write the same for name. And in order not to actually prolong this video, I leave it to you in order to practice and be more actually familiar with how to work with these property and attributes. Okay, when we are talking about attributes and variable, we have to bear in mind that accessibility level is an important issue. So if we want to use property instead of those getter and setter, we also must be worried about accessibility level. We can actually set some conditions in order to monitor the way that these values are changing, but sometimes we don't want to set new value. We want to initialize our variable with constructor, and then we don't want it to be changed at all. So we can do this by actually setting those that get to private I'll show you how you can do this. And but in order to initialize the value, you must use constructor, and after that you can actually deny the access of you can actually limit the access of setting new value to our data. Okay, here you see we have a property score, and get is public because the variable is public. You must get the value if you don't want to get the value of your attribute, so it is not actually necessary to even define that variable. Okay, here we have set, and I private that set, so you cannot change the value of this attribute. Okay, let's see what is auto-implemented property. Sometimes you don't need to actually check anything, and you don't want any condition prior to setting new value to your attribute or to your variables. And this way you use auto-implemented property. It is simple. You just need to write public, the type of the data, and also the name, and get and set. This way you can get and set the value of your variable. And in order to write this, you just need to write prop your application and double tap, and you see it is implemented. I'll show you how you can do this. Okay, here for example I want to actually define new variable. I just need to write prop, okay, and I just need to double tap, and our new variable is created. So here you can change the type of the variable. For example, I change it to string, and also the name of the variable, I change it to, for example, name. And here you can access to this name without any condition, or you can set new value to this variable without any condition. Let's try. Okay, here I write p1 dot name. As you see, I can set new name Leo, and I am going to print this. p1 dot name. Okay, let's see it is working or not. Yeah, this is right here. This is the easiest way to actually define new variable. Okay, the last concept that I want to talk about in this session is read-only auto-implemented properties. Actually, we talked about how to actually create auto-implemented properties. Sometimes you want to limit the access to our property, and we don't want to change the value of that variable during the program. So you just need to set a default value by constructor, and if you remove that set, you cannot actually set new value to that variable anymore. I'll show you how you can do this. Okay, you see here we have two variables, double x and double y, and here in our constructor we set new value, and here you see there is no set, so you cannot change the value of these variables. Let's see in our program how we can do this. Okay, here you see this is our name, and I changed the name to Leo, but I want to remove this set. Okay, and I want to see whether it is working or not. As you see here, there is an error. Property of indexer person.name cannot be assigned to. It is read-only. Okay, so this line must be removed, and you can just get the actually value of name, but you should actually bear in mind that when you create an object, you have to set a default value to our variable. In order to actually have a default value, when you call that variable, there is something in that variable, and you can use that value. Okay, here is the end of this session. I hope it was useful for you, and if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, don't forget to subscribe it, and if you enjoyed the video and find it useful, don't forget to like it. It will be a great support. See you later. Bye for now.